Hi. So in this video, we're going to be exploring the code where we will prompt the user to enter two numbers, and then we will compute the average of the two numbers. Okay, so it's a bit similar to the last video where we just asked the user to enter two numbers and we provided the sum. But in this video, we're going to talk about the average, and it's an important video because I'm going to share some critical concepts on the data types. All right. And using the correct ones when you are writing a program. Okay, so let's go ahead. So I've already created a new project here, and like I said before, the language that we need to select is C++. All right, and I'm going to go ahead to remove all these commands. Okay, C++. Okay, it is not changing to C++. Let me reload it again. Okay, so now it's C++. Alright, and basically the first thing we need to do is we need to say using namespace std. Alright, with that we don't need to put the standard colon here. Alright, so let me go ahead and run this. Okay, so you can see the hello world being printed out. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw the flow chart first. So to get the average of two numbers, basically what I need to do is I need to have the start over here. Alright, and then I will say input num1, okay, then input num2. Alright, once I have the two numbers, then I can compute the average. Alright, so I can say average goes to num1 plus num2 over 2. Alright, and once I have that, I can print the average. Okay, can print the average, and then after that will be the end of the program. So it's a fairly simple and sequential flow chart. Alright, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm going to first declare the two variables, integer num1 and num2. Alright, and I'm going to ask the user enter num1. Alright, with that being printed out, I will expect the user to enter a number, and the first number will go into num1. Alright, so again, very similar to our last video. So let me copy paste this. So this time it will be num2. Okay, now that we have both these numbers, we can compute the average. Alright, so when you compute the average, of course, in most cases we expect that it will have some decimal values. Alright, that it won't be a whole number. So in that case, we need to have a different data type. Okay, so there are different data types in C. Okay, so the one that we'll be using so far, int, which is basically integer, is used for whole numbers. Alright, when you are expecting a data to be represented using decimal points, then we use the other data type called float. Okay, or if you want more precision, then we say double. Okay, so for now we are going to use float. Okay, because we expect that the answer would be having decimal values. Alright, so I'm going to create a variable called float over here, and I'm going to call this average avg, and then we perform the processing. Alright, so if you look back at the flow chart, okay, where are we? We have started the program, the first input, second input, and now we are at this stage where we want to compute the average. Okay, so we're going to say average equals to num1 plus num2 divided by 2. Okay, so as you can see, I'm putting a bracket for the num1 plus num2. Again, this is to enforce the order of operation. Alright, so I want to be very clear in this expression that I am going to perform the addition of num1 and num2 first, and then I'm going to do the division by 2. Okay, so this is to enforce the order. Now once I compute the average, I can print it out. So I'm going to say C out, okay, average equals, and I'm going to print out the average over here. Okay, so all seems good. Okay, maybe I'll just put a \n over here just to make sure it goes to a new line. Okay, so let me run the code. Okay, so I'm going to enter num1. So let's take the first number as 2, the second number as 3, and let's see what's the answer. Okay, so the answer that is given, okay, the answer that is printed out here is 2. Now mathematically we know that 2 plus 3 is 5, and 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So what went wrong over here? Why isn't the answer 2.5? Why is it 2? Alright, so this is a very important concept, okay, that we must understand. Even though the answer is assigned to a float variable, okay, average is a float variable, this whole operation here is being carried out as an integer because the data involved, all the data involved in this operation is actually integers. Correct? Num1 is integer, num2 is integer. Alright, so when I do integer divided by plus integer, I get an integer, and when I do a divide by 2, I also get an integer. Okay, so integer divided by integer, I'm going to get an integer. So even though I assign the answer to a float, because the division is done purely as an integer, the decimal value is actually discarded by the time I assign it to the float variable. Alright, now how can I solve this? Okay, how can I solve this? The way to solve this is to make sure that when I perform the computation here, at least one of the parameters here must be a floating point variable or a decimal variable. Alright, so what are the options I have? Okay, so one option is I can do this. I can say float num1 and num2. Okay, float num1, num2. So let me run this. So now if I key in the first parameter 3, 2, I get 2.5. It's correct. Okay, now of course this works, but is it necessary for num1 and num2 to be float? Okay, so again it comes back to the intention of the program. Right? If you expect that the user is going to enter decimal values for num1 and num2, then yes, you can put it as float. But if not, then it's a waste of memory space. Okay, again, when you declare variables, you are consuming memory in the system, so you want to use the correct data types, again depending on how much memory you want to consume. Okay, so let me put this back as integer. Now what is the other alternative? Okay, so just now I mentioned that at least one of the data in the operation must be a float variable or a decimal point variable. So what I can do here is, instead of dividing by 2, I can divide by 2.0. So what am I doing here? I am making the whole operation now a float operation because the 2 is now a 2.0. So there's a decimal value there. So now if I run this, okay, 3 input and 2 input, the answer is also correct, 2.5. So in this way, I am actually keeping the actual num1 and num2 as integers, but I'm performing the actual division operation as a float operation because I'm dividing by 2.0. Alright, so these are different ways of how you can make sure that when you are performing a division operation, you are actually able to capture the decimal values without discarding them. Alright, so this is very important. Okay, so I hope that this concept is clear. Alright, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.